So I am recording my homily for the second Sunday of Advent, and as you can see, we have our Advent wreath here. And this week, there is so many things that are packed in. And so we have in the next couple days, we have the feast day of St. Nicholas, and talk about action-packed, right? A lot of people don't know, but St. Nicholas, he's the only saint that I know of who got into a fist fight. I mean, literally got into a fist fight with another bishop over theology. Talk about passion, right? So that was way back in the Council of Nicaea. Yes, I think it was the Council of Nicaea. Anyways, that's when they were passionate, right? And that's going to tie in perfectly with our gospel today with John the Baptist, because he's so intense. He's so intense about paving the way, opening the way, making the way straight for our Lord Jesus to enter into your life and my life. And so we have that. We have the feast day of Juan Diego, which is preparation for the feast day of Our Lady of Guadalupe. And so we have this, one of the most powerful events that happen on earth in terms of conversion of peoples, that through the Blessed Mother, that so many, 5 million people would come to embrace the Catholic faith, come to embrace Jesus in their lives. So it's a powerful thing. And just before that, we celebrate the feast day of the Immaculate Conception, which is also another great Marian solemnity. And for our parish here in Mount Vernon, it is our patroness. It is our feast day. And so there's lots and lots of things going on. So just a little bit of review. So last week, talking about Advent. Advent is a season of preparation, but there's two parts to that. And so one is, in that preparation, we're opening our hearts and our minds up to the fact that that joy, that energy, the passion for our faith, it needs to be there. Because if it's not there, it means there's something very wrong. And so last week I talked a little bit about a book that I've been reading called Overcoming Lukewarmness, Healing the Soul's Sadness. Great book. I was just reading it earlier today. It's one of the few books I've read in the last few weeks where just felt, it hurt to read it, because he got so deep into things that I've just let be lukewarm in my life. And so if you want to read it, please do. You can order it. It's a great book. So what he says in the book is that when a person doesn't have joy for the faith, nothing sparks something for the person. And I don't just mean emotionally, I mean deep down, profoundly. A person feels conviction, they feel energy and passion for the faith. And so when that's missing, when a person's just going through the motions, he says, that's an illness. The person is spiritually sick, and they need to be healed. Now, he went on to say that the cause of that is a person who at one point was really into their faith, was really abiding, loved praying, loved coming to Mass, all those things. Or the person tried really hard, they were trying to grow in their faith, and maybe they were pleading with God, maybe something was going on in their life that was very difficult, and so they were praying and praying and praying, but maybe they were asking for the wrong thing and they weren't really open to God's will. Either way, the person gave up. The person just gives up and says, well, I'll go through the motions, I'll support my wife, or I know I'm supposed to be a good example for the kids, and so I'll go to Mass, but there's nothing there. And so he says, the person is sick. So Advent's a great time to say, all right, if that's me, if I'm struggling with this lukewarmness, if I don't feel anything for God, then I need to do something. I need to figure that path out. And just one way this weekend that maybe will spark something for you. Okay? Now, the other part to Advent is a seriousness. There's a depth to it. When we talk about joy, we're not just talking about, listening to Christmas carols or having a Santa hat on. It's so much more deeper than that. Okay? And so we want to be sure that during Advent, we go deeper. Now, our culture, again, I'm still reviewing from last week. Our culture is open to the joy, and I think they're open to the seriousness of our faith during this season. They're a little bit more open. There's a little bit more open of a heart to the faith because everybody knows that this season belongs to Jesus Christ. Even if they don't believe in Him, even if they are as lukewarm as you can possibly get, they know deep down, or at the very least in their subconscious, they know this belongs to Jesus. Okay? Now, John the Baptist in our gospel today, he's a powerful person because he's so intense. Now, he's probably not the person you would invite to your birthday party, right? Or to some little family gathering. Because he's so intense. He intimidates probably, right? In the gospel, what does he do for the Pharisees and the Sadducees? Because they were lukewarm. They were the embodiment of lukewarmness. They weren't seeking God anymore. They were just about their little things, right? And so he says, you brood of vipers. You brood of vipers. I don't know if we can get away with that today, telling people that. But anyways, so you're probably not going to invite them to your birthday party. But your child's dying in the hospital. Do you want somebody intense like that? Do you want somebody so close to God? Absolutely. Absolutely. If you've been away from the church for a long time, or somebody's been away from the church for a long time, and you want to go to confession, do you want a priest who's lukewarm? Do you want a priest who doesn't really care about you? Or do you want somebody like John the Baptist who's so intense? He says, I am not even worthy to carry the sandals of the one who is to come. I mean, somebody who has just such a deep conviction of the power that Jesus brings into our world. So in the seriousness, we want it. We want that. Now, I'm going to give a little example of why nobody should ever really want me to be their pastor. Probably kind of like how we might not want John the Baptist to be our pastor. So a couple years ago, when I came into one of my previous parishes, their practice was to have a Christmas party for the kids, and they would have Santa Claus, and they would have Christmas carols, Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer, and all those things. And so I told them that we were going to have some changes, that we were not going to have Santa Claus. Santa Claus was not going to be anywhere near our campus. We were not going to have any secular Christmas carols. Everything, every last thing we were going to do in that Christmas party was going to be about Jesus. Everything. Whether the gifts they were giving the kids or whether the songs we were going to sing, everything had to be about Jesus. I thought they would like that. Sometimes people don't like change. Easter comes around. No Easter egg hunt. Nope. No Easter bunny. No. Everything has to be about Jesus. So if we're going to do anything, it's got to be about Jesus. Well, anyways, a little while later, somebody came up to me in the parish and he says, Father, you hear what they're saying about you, don't you? And I was like, no. And they said, yep, Father Peter, he crucified Santa Claus and buried the Easter bunny. So I guess I can live with that. Anyways, it's because if we take this season and we water it down, if we take the season and we somehow hide Jesus amongst all the gifts under the tree as though he was one of many other things going on, man, we lose the power. We lose everything Jesus wanted us to do. Read the story of his birth. Everybody in every single account of the Gospels, well, in Matthew and Luke, the two accounts of his birth, everybody is getting drawn in to him. He's the focal point, nothing else. You know what? Our world needs that. And they want it deep down. You may not realize it right at this moment, but they do. And so we give Jesus, we put Jesus out there. And we don't rob this season of its power by diluting it with other things. So the other day was the feast day of St. Francis Xavier, great Jesuit missionary priest. Back when the Jesuits were like the Marines or the Delta Force, the Navy SEALs. I mean, they were phenomenal. They were courageous and they were so disciplined, but they were also in love with people and the people who had not heard about Jesus. They were fearless. And so he went to the Orient, he went to the Far East, and there's stories of him baptizing hundreds of thousands of people. I mean, no exaggeration. It was just phenomenal. It reminds me of Our Lady of Guadalupe. Our Lady of Guadalupe becomes this instrument as our Lord's mother to bring all these people to her Son. Powerful, really powerful. So, St. Francis Xavier, he's in the Far East. He's in these villages and towns where the people are so hungry for the faith that he would try to slip away, kind of like Jesus, when Jesus would try to slip away and go pray. So he would try to slip away from the people to go pray, the liturgy of the hours, and they would follow him. And the kids would constantly be tugging on his sleeve and saying, "Teach us to pray. Teach us what you're doing. Teach us the Lord's Prayer." To have that kind of hunger, right? It's the opposite of lukewarmness. To have that kind of love. So Francis Xavier goes back to Europe, and at this time, most of the universities are Catholic. And they're full of people studying theology, and they're studying the faith. And he thought, it's wonderful, but he would try to convince them to do what he's doing. He would try to convince them that you can't just be there. You can't just learn about God. You have to bring God and his love to the people. He says he couldn't get them. They wouldn't go. It's like they were in their comfort zone. They were where it was comfortable. But to go out and to live amongst strange culture, strange people, strange language, strange food, and to bring Jesus, lukewarmness, right? It's an illness. I want to offer just a last story on this. A couple years ago, I did a funeral for a teenage boy. He was, I believe, 18 at the time. And I kind of knew his funeral was coming. He was hanging around the wrong people, wrong crowds, using drugs. He was very involved in that, and lots of bad things, even kind of gang stuff. And I kind of knew at some point something bad was going to happen. And it did. And so I ended up doing his funeral. But years before that, when he was younger, he was an altar server. And he was a happy kid. I mean, he was the kid who always had a big smile on his face. He loved his mom. He loved his mom so much. He was very devoted to her. He loved his little sisters. He was like a little sheepdog with them. He was just very protective. He loved them very much. He loved his dad. And all of that changed in one day. It was the day his dad ran out on them and never came back. And his dad had problems. There were things going on in his life. There were demons there. But he ran out on them. And so he never adjusted to that. He never got used to the fact that was going to be their life. And so he went into depression. And then some other bad things happened. And then he just spiraled into that darkness. And all kinds of bad things happened. And I can imagine somebody who's reading the newspaper who read about his murder. They could say, he deserved what he got. But if you had known him before, see, there was a failure. There was a breakdown. And there's a breakdown of multiple people, especially his dad. But there was no John the Baptist. There wasn't somebody there who was intense, who who could have spoken to his father and said, don't you dare run out on your family. Think about what it'll do to them. Don't just think about yourself, right? It's hard sometimes when we're lukewarm, because when we're lukewarm, we think about ourselves. There was one night he was coming up to the door of the church, and it was really late at night. It was about 10 o'clock at night, and I was closing up the church and turning off all the lights, and so it was just me and him. And at this point, he's already struggling with schizophrenia. And so he had been in the drugs, he had been in all kinds of bad things, but now he was having mental things were going on. And so he was struggling with schizophrenia, and he clearly wasn't in his right mind, but he asked if he could come into the church. And so I let him in, and the lights were still completely out, so the church was pitch black. And he's just kind of wandering around the church. And I'm just standing in the back watching him. And just lamenting, because it felt like there was nothing I could do. Finally, he goes up into the sanctuary space. And he stands right behind the altar, where the priest normally stands. And he just looks down at the altar, and he just stares at it. For a long time. I can almost imagine what he was feeling. It was you almost feel like he couldn't break free of all the stuff that had happened in his life. But I almost felt like he wanted to put it there on the altar. He had some things in his hand, and one of them was a flower that he had pulled from one of the yards that he had been walking by, and he just put it there on the altar. And then he just continued to walk around. John the Baptist. To somebody who's lukewarm, he may seem threatening, but he's just intense. We need that. We need that in this season. Because our world in so many ways is broken. There's people broken. We're broken. We're all broken, right? But we need that power to somebody who can just cut through all the distractions and all the dilutedness of our world and say, here is our gem. Here is Jesus Christ. Don't filter it. Just let people come to him. So that's what John the Baptist did. And that's what our world needs. All right. I want to say one last thing. So I just found out that one of my former parishioners from St. Francis Cabrini had passed away really suddenly. Was not expected at all. And so I just wanted to say for the family of Jim Spencer that this evening I offered a Mass for him and praying for him and his family. So, and if you, after this, if you could say a little prayer for him, that would be great. All right, God bless.